Well, as we continue looking at chapter 4 of Proverbs, we pick up the discussion in verse 19, where it's really a contrast with what he said in the last verse. Previously in verse 18, he told us that the path of the righteous is this bright gleaming light that shines brighter and brighter like the fullness of day. But then he went on to say, but the way of the wicked is a deep darkness, he said, and they do not know what makes them stumble. Again, let's look at this a little more closely. When he says the way of the wicked is a deep darkness, in Matthew 6:23, Jesus said, if the light then that is within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, if I believe a lie to be the truth with all my heart, soul, mind, body, and strength, then I'm going to find myself ending up in a situation that I don't want to be in. And that's the simple truth of it. I mean, con men, particularly when you're talking about in the financial world, basically con men are people who are able, the word con actually comes from confidence. They call them confidence men. They are people who could bring you into their confidence, or you would let them into your confidence, and they would tell you something and claim that it was true and convince you that it was true, but then you'll discover in your own experience and interaction with them that it wasn't true. And the way you'll find that is usually through pain. Because things that are true, we often talk about how the truth hurts. The truth only hurts when you previously have believed a lie. And that's where the truth hurts. If I believe something that's not true, and I discover it's not true because now I see it with the truth, that is what's really, really painful. And many of us know that pain. We've known it relationally. We've been drawn in by people who tell us that they're our best friend. I know of a person who is always saying, oh, this person is my best friend, and they're this and that. And then 6 months later, if they haven't just gone dark and ghosted them or canceled them, they just simply will say bad, negative things. Oh, I'm so sick of them. I found out what they're really like. And after a while, you find out this is a pattern. They go through relationships like this on an ongoing and regular basis. And that's a really, really painful thing. And that really is an indicator of somebody who is, at their core, a wicked person. And they're wicked because they see relationships as a way of getting what they want. You're a stepping stone to what they're working towards. And unfortunately, there are many people in the business world, some are very, very successful because they're very good at convincing other people to believe something that's not true. And in many ways, it's kind of the world of politics to a large degree, because in the political world, we've become accustomed to people running for office, making promises about things that they're going to do, things they're going to fix, the issues that they're for and the things that they're against. But once they get to that position of power, they do the complete opposite, or even worse, they just pretend like they don't need to do anything at all. And we realize that we put our confidence in something that we shouldn't have. We've been conned by somebody who's persuaded us. And that's why he said that the wicked, where they live, is a deep darkness. And I think that's important for us to think about that for a moment, that deep darkness, because you see, we often get angry and bitter about the con men in our life, people who lie and deceive and set us up and take advantage of us. But it may not be apparent to you, but as Asaph said in Psalm 73, he said that he was envious of the wicked until he saw their end. The reality is these people are never really ever happy. They get an enjoyment or a pleasure at hurting or harming or taking advantage, lying and stealing, ripping other people off. They feel superior than you and smarter than you and better than you. It gives them a certain perverse ego boost. But in the end, they're going to find themselves friendless. They'll find themselves probably broke and lost and pretty desperate, because eventually it catches up with them. And we kind of see that happening quite a bit, especially when people prey on the righteous. We find that the end result is a pretty miserable life, because God removes any kind of blessing that might be there, any kind of favor that they might enjoy when they intentionally do things to harm, especially God's people, who are biblically the apple of God's eyes. He will remove his blessing from them. It's kind of like what God said to Abraham about his descendants. He said, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse curse those who curse you. So it isn't like people can do bad things and then there's no consequence. He just simply says, I remove my blessing from them and I let the devil have his way with them. Paul put it that way in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, where he's talking about a man in the church who was committing sexual immorality. And he said you should kick him out of the church. In other words, don't let him be part of the fellowship. Excuse me. And then he used this phrase, deliver him to Satan for the destruction of his flesh. So that he is no longer under the protective covering of the church, but he's outside the church where the devil can have free shot at him. And that's really what happens many times to people who do evil things, especially they do evil to God's people. I know so many situations where somebody will be married to a Christian woman or a Christian man, and they'll betray them, they'll leave them, they'll try to take everything they have and then run off with somebody else. And the person who has been faithful in the marriage now is left as the victim. They're left, suddenly left trying to pick up all the pieces, including their own life and the lives of their children and so forth. And we look at that and say, that's so unfair, I get ripped off. Well, it is, but you have to remember, God is a just God. And that person is going to reap the consequences of what they've done, because he blesses those who bless you. He will curse those who curse you. That's, of course, part of the reason why I think it's just important for us as a nation to be supportive of the country of Israel, because God made that promise first to them. But it applies to us as well, because he said the way of the wicked is a deep darkness. And he says, it goes on, it says, and they don't know what makes them stumble. They trip over something that's not there. I remember the picture of President Biden when he was speaking at some military event, and as he was going off the stage, he tripped and he fell on his face, and then he blamed it on something that wasn't there. And, I thought to myself, that's kind of an illustration, if you will, that he was tripping, not just over that, he was tripping over everything, because mentally he had become so declined and so basically incapable of carrying out the duties of his office, which even his supporters admit now. I mean, Jake Tapper wrote a book about the cover-up when he was one of the biggest parts of the cover-up. I mean, it's amazing when I talk about conmen and liars. But you see, that's what happens, because they don't see what they're doing. They don't see what's in their way. They don't anticipate a problem until they're in the middle of the problem, and then they don't even know how to extricate themselves from it. And usually, when they lied and get caught up in a problem, then they try to lie their way out of that problem, and the hole gets deeper and deeper and deeper. I think it's really interesting how that in Isaiah 40, he speaks about his blessing upon the people of God. When he writes, he says, the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on the wings of eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. And they will also be able to do it with clarity, and they'll be able to do it knowing where they're going, and they'll do it with a light before their path and a lamp to their feet, and they will have, like Moses, they'll have a really significant amount of divine stamina and vigor. In fact, one of my favorite passages in the book of Deuteronomy is at the very end, when it talks about the death of Moses. When it says in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 7, it says, Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. Keep in mind, he wasn't suffering from cataracts, which, has been a common problem. We read about the high priest Eli, who had become so blinded, not only in his eyesight, but also in his spiritual eyesight, that there was no longer any clear revelation of God in the land, because he and his priesthood and his sons had become such violators of God's righteousness, and he allowed it to happen and didn't stop it when he should have. And so he has a physical disability where he can't see clearly, but he also has a spiritual disability. And what's significant is what happens. He falls backwards and breaks his neck and dies. So it's almost like he's acting out what he said, that the wicked will fall into a deep darkness and they'll stumble and not know why, and it often be to their demise. Well, I want to be like Moses. I've told the Lord, if you want to take me, you can take me whenever you want to take me, but let me have a clear eye to be able to see clearly, not physically only, but spiritually as well. And let me have a natural vigor, a vitality, a strength, so that I can continue to earnestly and energetically do the work, do the things that you've called me to do. If I get to a point where I have to be put into a retirement home, first thing I'm going to try to do is find a way of being of service to somebody. But if I have nothing to contribute, then what's the reason for hanging around anymore? I just want to go home where the party is anyway. That's what my mom said when she was on her deathbed. She woke up one evening, and as I was sitting there, and she looked around, and then she said, "Am I still here?" And I said, "Yep." And she said, "Oh, darn, I'd hoped I'd gone to heaven." She said, because she says, "This place is so boring, and I have nothing to do. I just want to go home and go to heaven where all the fun is." And that I left her that evening, and I got a call from one of our friends who had dropped by, and she said, "Your mom passed away just a little bit ago." So I thought, well, she got to go home. She got to go to the party. That's the way I want to go. Well, anyway, have a great week. I pray that your time of worshiping with God's people this weekend will be great. I pray that if you're able, you can do it in person. If not, I pray that it'll be just as blessed when you follow online. The Lord be with you and continue to bestow his great grace on you in Jesus' holy name. Amen.